Our next session on energy transition for India, headed by Anil Kumar Jain, Vikram Mehta, Vivek Kumar Devangan, and Manu Srivastava, in conversation with Dr. Rajat Kathuria.
विवेक ये हमारा वर्चुअल सेशन है ना, तो आपको फोकस वहाँ करना है। अनिल जैन सर आपको वहाँ है, ठीक है? ये स्क्रीन बाकी लोगों को। ये कहाँ विवेक है? विवेक आएंगे। हाँ मनु सर तो हैं। विवेक कहाँ है? नहीं आएंगे। बस शुरू कर दें। आप लोग शुरू कर सकते हैं। एक बार पूछ लो। हाँ अब 2 मिनट रुक के फोन ही कर लो। देखो एक मिनट, देखो या तो वो आए हैं वो नहीं आए।
One of the panelists is not here with us, so we'll be beginning the session shortly.
May I make a request? Because sometimes it takes time for the speakers to find their way in. Would you like to get started?
Yes.
And have him join us?
Yes, absolutely.
Before we start signaling you, time up, whereas you've not even started, so it's not fair. And Mr. Jain has been waiting. So all of you have been waiting, actually.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers for this session. Do you want to say something before I start?
She does.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
India is currently undergoing a significant energy transition marked by a shift towards cleaner and more sustainable sources of energy. The country is committed to reducing its reliance on fossil fuels and increasing the source of renewable energy in its energy mix. To shed more light on the topic, we have our panelists. Firstly, we have Mr. Anil Kumar Jain. He has joined with us virtually. He is a 1986 batch MPIS officer who has spent more than a decade formulating energy sector policies at the Petroleum and Coal Ministries as well as Niti Aayog. He has a doctorate in energy studies and has papers and a book published on the country's natural gas sector. Accompanying him, we have Vikram Mehta ji. He has completed his bachelor's degree in mathematics honors from St. Stephen's College, Delhi University. He has a master's degree in politics and economics honors from Magdalen College, Oxford University, UK, and a master's degree in energy economics from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. Mr. Vikram was until November 2012 chairman of the Shell Group of companies in India. His career began as a member of the Indian Administrative Service of the Government of India in 1978. We welcome you, sir. Next up, we have Manu Srivastava ji. In 1991 batch, IAS officer. He holds a BTech and MTech degrees in electrical engineering from IIT Delhi. Out of the 31 years of experience, he has worked 16 years in energy sector, namely natural gas, electricity, and renewable energy. He has led path-breaking innovative projects in the field of solar energy. His 750 MW REVA project has proved to be an inflection point in the history of solar energy in India. It was the first project in the country to provide solar energy at rates lower than that of coal-based power. It is the only project in the country supplying power to an institutional customer. Delhi Metro is running on this project. 65% of its daytime demand is met with solar power from REVA. Next up, we have Dr. Rajat Kathuria. He is the Dean of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences and Professor of Economics at Shiv Nandar Institution of Eminence. He is the former Director and Chief Executive of the Indian Council for Research and International Economic Relations. He worked with the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India during its initial years. He is currently the co-chair of the T20 Digital Task Force under India's G20 presidency. He has an undergraduate degree in economics from St. Stephen's College, a master's degree from Delhi School of Economics, and a PhD degree from the University of Maryland, College Park. I welcome all our dear speakers. Now I'd like you to please unfold the conversation.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the organizers for having me. This must be the first time in my life, and I've done several panels, I think, that I'm surrounded by 3 IAS officers, either current or retired, or having taken retirement. So I feel rather rebuked. My genius seems to be rebuked here. So in the tradition of the civil service, you start with the senior most and go to the junior. I'm actually going to reverse that. So I will start with Manu. But before I sort of begin the conversation, let me say that this extremely complex subject of energy transition, it's got as we say in government in India, government is seized of the matter, and so is the rest of the world seized of this matter. Science will either have a solution or it already does, but that is not going to be sufficient, right? I mean, one heard about population and malthus, and we thought that food production would not keep up with the demand, and therefore starvation would result and populations would die. Technology came to the rescue, and there have been several examples in economics or in the economic history of nations where science has provided a solution to the most pressing and immediate problems. And here we're talking about energy transition, moving away from coal, getting into renewables, etc. So science will have a solution, if not already, but in the future. But as I said, it needs also to be implemented. And that's where negotiations, both domestically with our own constituencies, international negotiations, elements of justice in the transition, what's fair, what's not fair, what is the international responsibility. This is a global public good if you're looking at climate change. And energy transition is going to be an input into the process of sustainability and climate change. So it's rather complex, and sometimes it becomes very, very emotive. And it has become emotive also in the COP and in UNFCCC. So extremely complex subject, but we're really fortunate. I think this is an excellent panel. And I've known Anil ji and Vikram for many years, and I had the good fortune of talking to Manu last evening at dinner, and he said the most interesting thing. So I'm going to open with Manu and ask him to talk us through his experience in the REVA project, which has got endorsements from most institutions domestically and the rest of the world as well. So Manu, over to you.
Thanks for inviting me here and having me, and it's wonderful to be sharing this stage with Vikram ji and Sir Anil Jain sir. Firstly, about energy transition, my short view is that it is not such a complicated issue, and the technology would really show us the way. And the policy would adjust around that. The policy has to develop around that. We can only hope that the policy doesn't, is not trying to resist the process, but tries to help the process. I think what I shared yesterday with him was that when we moved from Stone Age to the Iron Age, it's not that we ran out of stone. It's that we got a better equipment. Iron was better than stone, so we moved seamlessly from Stone Age to Iron Age. And whatever adjustments would have had to be made by the society then, by civilizations then, were made, but they are footnotes to history. The historical processes that we moved from Stone Age to the Iron Age. So the same is being seen now as we move from coal to better forms of energy. Technology is heralding the way, and other things would adjust around it. The policy has to adjust around it. So earlier we used to hear of an oil shock theory. So now we all realize that nothing like that is ever going to happen. It's not that we are ever going to run out of oil. It is that we would have better forms of energy sooner than that. Today, as we speak, solar is cheaper than coal-based energy. So the example that you gave, Delhi Metro is running on a project that we had set up in Madhya Pradesh. 65% of their daytime demand is met from this project in Rewa, 750 megawatt project in Rewa, which supplies solar energy to them. Now, the interesting part is that this energy is far cheaper than the power which the Delhi Metro would otherwise have been getting from Delhi Discoms. Delhi Metro has not made any investment in the project. So I always like to talk of it as zero investment, savings from day one, moving towards net zero. So, but as I said, this is 65% of the daytime demand is coming from this project, not the nighttime demand. For the nighttime demand, we are still dependent on conventional energy because as we speak, solar today is cheaper than coal-based power, but solar plus storage is not. So in the daytime, it makes sense to replace coal conventional power. It doesn't make so for the night. But this is a process of transition. Going back 10 years from now, solar was not cheaper than coal-based power. Solar was more expensive. But over the last few years, solar has become cheaper. And one would be confident that even solar plus storage would become cheaper than coal-based power over times to come. It might take 10 years, it might take 15, but it might take even 20. But definitely it's not going to take 25 years. That is why there is a lot of resistance in setting up new coal-based thermal power plants, because most people realize that perhaps solar plus storage or wind plus storage would be cheaper than coal-based power 25 years down the line. So it might not make sense to invest in a new coal-based plant, but though of course we have to continue with the plants that we have. What is the role of you talked of what could be our role, or you talked in context of Rewa. My learning in that has been that when we set up this Rewa project, the policies were the same as they were, but the transformative impact of this project was that we could identify the uncertainties and risks faced by investors in setting up projects. We took conscious steps to address those risks and uncertainties. It was through contractual agreements, provisions in our contracts. It was through project structuring, etc. So, large number of things that we have that it might take long to talk about them. But at the end of it, we could get prices with the same policies, prices much lower than what were the prevailing prices at that time. At that time, Government of India companies, NTPC and SECI, were paying a viability gap funding to buy solar power at 4.5 rupees per unit. And without any viability gap funding, without any subsidy, though it was a state-run company, we got prices of below 3 rupees. This was achieved through project structuring, And this, I suppose, could be the role that the government or the system could be playing by consciously trying to address the risks and uncertainties of the investors, of the developers, so that they could provide renewable energy at cheaper rates, which would finally help in greater adoption of renewable energy in the system. Thanks.
Thank you, Manu. And this is something that I have heard for a very long time, which is that if you have the right project and if you structure the project correctly, there are lots of investors, both domestic and foreign, who are willing to come in and invest in any project, give it, even clean energy projects. And one of the spillovers of a clean energy project is, of course, that you are likely to reduce the carbon emissions. So the feeling is that when you have this energy transition away from coal, away from fossil fuels, into renewables, the amount of emissions, you're actually greening your energy system. But this sort of change or this transition may not happen immediately or may require a sort of an intermediary to be able to transition completely from fossil to, let's say, renewables. And here I bring in Anil ji, who's just written a book on gas as a bridge to net zero, which is what we are all aiming at. So we've committed by 2070, we'll be net zero in our emissions. So in that process, Anil ji, how do you see gas, and what have you said in your book about India's experience? Over to you, Anil ji. Can you hear me? We can't hear you. I think, are you on mute?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Yes.
So thanks very much, Rajat. It's a privilege to be on this panel. My friends Manu and Vikram are here. And as I was introduced, I belong to this cadre. So it's an honor to be speaking at this event. I want to thank Raghavji, lots of my seniors and gurus in the audience. So very quickly, since we have, dearth of time. So why do we need to talk about gas? So first of all, as Manu mentioned, that these are the times of solar and wind. So where does gas fit in? Especially because gas itself is a fossil fuel. Now, firstly, we must know the science behind it. Natural gas is at least 40% less emission intensive than coal. And with India having almost 36% of its energy share coming from coal, if we were to move away theoretically from coal to gas, you can imagine the extent to which we can hit the emissions that come out of it. And even from liquid fuels, natural gas is less emission intensive than about 20%. So within the set of fossil fuels, natural gas is a cleaner fossil fuel. And we also must know that there is no consumption sector where energy is applied to which gas cannot be utilized. Gas can be used to generate power, gas can be used to make urea, gas can be used as a fuel in power sector and for cooking, transport even. So now electricity has come to the fore as EV, otherwise so far we only had to rely on liquid fuels for transport, and gas can very well serve that need. So looking at this versatility and advantage which gas offered, globally the share of gas has been about 25% in the global primary energy mix. So roughly all the energy sources until some time were in equal proportion. We had 25% coming from gas, 25% coming from coal, 25% coming from oil, and the basket of clean fuels, including nuclear, hydro, renewables, being clubbed under the balance 1/4. But in India, the share of gas for a small bit when one domestic field came into production, share of gas in India's energy basket went up beyond 10%. But ever since then, which was about 13 years back when this production happened, the share of gas is constantly coming down. So today it is around 6%. So you can imagine the dilemma or the headwinds which natural gas faces, despite the advantages which I just spoke of. That within the Indian energy system, today the share of gas being 6%, whereas there was an ambition expressed no lesser than that by the Prime Minister that India should try and get to 15% share of natural gas by the year 2030. We seem to be going downwards. So this book which you alluded to, in fact, it was my second book based on my doctoral research, where I studied what might be the role of natural gas in India's energy mix in the year 2030. Now, 3-4 takeaways which my study gave away. Firstly, what I found was I looked at 7 largest energy consumers of the world, and I looked at their energy mix to see that over the last, let's say, a period of, I started from 1980, what was the energy mix in these 7 large energy consumers of the world, and then I looked at 2019. So I thought that maybe 39 years is a long enough time for a nation to be able to drop the fuels which it doesn't find good for the society, maybe non-competitive, maybe bad fuels, and to be able to induct cleaner, better, more competitive fuels. And to my surprise, I found that out of these 7 nations, the largest energy consumers, which of course we all know, US, China, Japan, Germany, Brazil, what we found was that it was India alone where the share of fossil in fact grew in these 39 years. So in 1980, our share of fossil fuel was less than 90%, and in 2019, it rose to be more than 90%. In all the other countries, including China, which is a heavy, guzzler of liquid fuel as well as coal, even there they were able to reduce the share of fossil fuels as a group. So that was my first finding. I mean, you can go into the reasons why is our energy system so inflexible that we are not able to induct cleaner fuels, etc. And this inquiry may be useful for us to study that when we want to reach net zero in 2070, will the reasons which hold back our flexibility continue to trouble us? The other 2-3 things which I found, domestic production of gas is correlated with a high share of natural gas in an energy system. So, Europe and Japan are 2 exceptions. You see, US has a very high share of natural gas production. Russia has, even Canada has. So these are countries which had high gas production and high gas shares. But in Europe, if you look at, let's say, France, you look at Germany, and you look at some of the other countries, and you look at Japan, they hardly had any natural gas production, but they do have a high share of gas. And that is because Japan is an exception. You see, Japan, is an island and doesn't have virtually any energy source other than maybe some solar or wind. So Japan was able to get LNG. It was able to, in fact, was the pioneer that it was able to get natural gas liquefied, and brought to the nation. So it had to import all fuel, so it thought of inducting natural gas as well. And the entire European countries, they were able to get natural gas from Russia because of the on-land pipeline, which has actually become a bane for them, that they were dependent on that pipeline and with the Ukraine problem. So another finding of mine has been that lack of domestic production does impact the uptake of natural gas. And the third important reason I found was there's a huge locking in. The locking in means that, we have set up our refineries, we set up our pipeline system, we have set up our transport system, cars are diesel-based, petrol-based. So it's very difficult to get away from an energy system which is already well entrenched, especially, our large PSUs. Very difficult to imagine that Indian Oil would think of jettisoning, closing down refineries and getting into gas or hydrogen or something of that sort. This is something we need to keep in mind for the future as well. And the fourth reason maybe, which was very important, is non-competitiveness of gas. Because we've been importing gas and gas markets were not very flexible, not very open. In the last 15, 20 years, there has been an improvement in the functioning of global gas markets, but the Ukraine crisis sent it again for a toss. So these were my major findings. Going forward, when you talk of what role might gas play, these 4 points reflect on that as well. Because we do not have much gas production, we are import dependent for more than half of what the gas that we consume. But if India was to press the pedal on consuming more natural gas, then the entire this increment would have to be import ridden. So you can imagine that from 55%, 52% of import dependence in gas, we may have to go up to 60, 70, 80, which is something which sets us back. The second thing which I find is that the large share of coal, and as you know that I served in that sector for some time. Now the coal prices are controlled. There's a large PSU, Coal India Limited, and electricity. We know Manu spoke about how renewable can make a difference, but let's not forget, as of now, more than 70% of our national grid, of the total energy that we generate in the country, comes from coal. And the coal prices to power sector is just one example I'm giving you. Since February 2018, in the last 6 years, the price of coal from CIL, from Coal India to electricity sector, has not been changed. So with this kind of a distortion in the energy markets, I don't think at least natural gas can play a role. But yes, solar and wind prices are coming down. They will play a role. So I'll sum up by saying that amongst the 4 major energy consuming sectors in which we usually divide the entire economy, one of them being industry, other being agriculture, third being buildings, in which we take up heating, cooling, cooking, and the fourth being transport. I see a role for gas only in the city systems where you have cooking, even in well-developed economies, you do have piped natural gas. So piped natural gas is going to replace LPG in the coming years. And transport, I see a very, very bright future, both in long-distance trucking, where LNG may come in, and within the city, cars, scooters, three-wheelers, etc., are going to shift to. And electric mobility will impact CNG, but I don't see it happening very, very quickly. So gas indeed will play the role of a bridge fuel, as it has been playing all over the world for the next 10, 15 years, and then hydrogen, electric mobility, and all these things. Thanks.
Thank you, Anilji. Very informative and insightful. Taking a segue from you to Vikram. Vikram, you've had vast experience in this sector, and you're almost sort of the go-to person when people... So I wanted to ask you to share your experience on energy transition, but I have a specific question which stems from what Anilji said, is in this politics around international negotiations, when you talk about fossil fuels, coal has been singled out. And India is obviously, for the reasons that Anilji is mentioning, resisting that. So why do you think coal is being singled out? Is it because it's the most dirty fuel of all fossil fuels, or is there some other politics behind it? Vikram, over to you.
Thanks, Rajat. Just a clarification. I don't think the 2 IAS colleagues here would recognize me as an IAS colleague, only because I never got confirmed. I left the IAS after 18 months, and I had to return my salary to the government, because I was still on probation. So I ended up returning 15,000 rupees, which was 15 into 700 rupees a month. That was our salary at that time. So that's just an aside. So on the energy transition, a lot has been said, so let me not repeat that, but make a couple of 3 or 4 points which are of a general nature. First is that this energy transition that everyone talks about today is the third energy transition over the past 300 years. The first, of course, was wood to coal. The second was coal to oil and gas. And now we are talking about fossil fuels to non-fossil fuels. There's a fundamental difference between the first 2 energy transitions and the one that we are currently undergoing. And that difference is that the first 2 were, in some senses, additive. In other words, you transitioned from wood to coal, but you did not replace wood as an energy source. You added coal. Similarly, we transitioned from coal to oil, but you did not replace coal. In fact, over the last 100 years, the consumption of coal in absolute terms doubled, but the share of oil in the energy basket increased relative to coal. So there was a transition, but it was not as if you substituted. The energy transition that we are now encountering, that we are now talking about, has to be substitutive if it is to be successful, if it is to reach us to that objective of net zero. It cannot be additive. Definitely there's going to be, oil and gas and coal are going to remain part of the energy basket, but the objective, and that's what I want us to focus on when we talk about energy transition in this third energy transition. The objective is to substitute fossil fuels for non-fossil fuels. So that's one difference. The second difference that I think we should talk about is that whereas the first two energy transitions took place because of economics and convenience, this third transition is going to be propelled by policy. Yes, economics is going to be a factor, convenience may or may not be a factor, but it will not happen unless government policies support it, whether through regulatory initiatives or tax incentives or other forms of non-economic incentives. By behavioral change, people will have to change their behavior. So this is another very major difference. The first two transitions happened, as I say, because A, of economics, and B, of convenience. It was more convenient, for example, to fuel the ships with oil, liquid oil, than with coal, So that's the second very important factor. The third important factor is that we're going to face a major supply chain issue when it comes to this energy transition. The metals and minerals required to effectuate a transition from fossil fuels to non-fossil fuels are copper, nickel, cobalt, and these are minerals that are concentrated in a few countries only. Just imagine, oil and gas, 40% of oil and gas come from USA, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, 3 countries. 40% of copper comes from 2 countries, Peru and Chile. It's a much more concentrated supply chain, but it gets worse. The copper ore is produced in Chile and Peru, but 65% of it is processed in China. Lithium, which is the 4th mineral, it's produced in Australia. The ore is produced in Australia and Brazil and Chile, but it is the predominant lithium carbonate, which is required for batteries, is actually processed in China. So the supply chain is going to be a very major issue, not just for economic reasons, but also for geopolitical reasons. Economic reasons because it's a concentrated, the supply, the resources are concentrated, but also because of geopolitical reasons, because we will be dependent on China in particular for sourcing the crucial metals required for us to effectuate the transition. The fourth point is that whilst I think your opening remark hit the nail on the head, Rajat, technology is not going to be the problem. Technology has provided the solution and will continue to provide the solution. The problem is going to be finance. The problem is going to be how do you actually raise the money to develop the infrastructure required to actually scale up from 6% or 7% of renewables to 50% of renewable in the market, in the energy basket. That's the problem. And we're talking about trillions of dollars of investment that will be required. Not globally, in India itself. Okay, our grid, our transmission grid is simply not capable right now of absorbing on a scale basis the flow of molecules on an intermittent basis. What does that mean? It means that the sun does not shine all day long. At night you don't have the sun. The wind does not blow all the time. So when the sun is not shining, you have to store the molecules. You have to store, and only then will you be able to meet peak demand. But We don't have the storage technology or competitive storage technology to actually store. Also, our grid, our transmission grid, does not have still the robustness to manage this flow. So you have to upgrade the transmission network. Now that's a lot of money. Where does it come from? The mechanisms generating money has simply not been created. A lot of, and Rajat disagree, a lot of economists have come up with kind of solutions which work on paper, but are simply not working because of politics. And that's the problem that we face with the energy transition. We have a problem that recognizes no national boundaries, global warming. That's not something that recognizes national boundaries. If India today contributes 7.6% of carbon emissions, America contributes, I think, 13.5%, and China 36.5 or 31.5%. And yes, we have every right to claim and demand that the world does not insist on us moving from fossil fuels to non-fossil fuels. On the other hand, when the world warms up, and all of us are going to suffer, we have 150 million people living on the coastline. When the sea levels rise, they're going to lose their livelihood. When the glaciers in the Himalayas start to melt, the floods in UP and Bihar are going to affect the farmers. We can't escape from this. So there are no national boundaries to global warming. And yet, there is no international institution that has the political and judicial legal weight to implement the kind of conversations that are taking place, whether in COP28 or wherever. So that's the other problem we face. So these are the 5 issues that we face with regard to the energy transition. I'm not saying that we should be pessimistic, but I am saying that this energy transition is going to be a very long process. And just to pick up on what Anil said, our economy is embedded in fossil fuels. And it takes a very long time to shift economic systems from one energy system to another energy system. Thomas Edison discovered or illuminated the lower half of New York in 1885. It took American factories 45 years to shift from steam power to electric power. And that was because most of the factories were not designed to take this new revolutionary technology. They had to be either redesigned or rebuilt. The same thing is going to happen in India and most other countries that are currently encountering this energy transition. So that's the kind of issues that we have to keep in mind. We really have to not think of this in idealistic terms. We have to recognize that this is going to be a very long drawn process, and the fund is going to be politics. The governments have to move fast. And America, for example, has just introduced the largest energy, you might say, transition bill in the world. $400 billion are going to be spent on trying to bring companies, attract investment in clean energy in America. Okay? Our production-linked incentive system is all of $10 billion. So you can just see the difference. We're not going to be able to make this effect unless we actually recognize that there is going to need a lot more effort on the part of government, especially with regard to incentive schemes and financing schemes. So that's the energy transition issue. So your specific question was on coal. I think the issue of coal is simply because it is the dirtiest fuel. And every time people get together around a table, like they do in COP22, 28, and 27, and 26, they have to focus on coal because it is instrumental, it is critical if you're going to talk about a clean energy future. And in India, we simply do not have the luxury of being able to say that we are going to phase out coal. We can talk about phasing down coal, but anyone who insists on our politicians to say that they should accept the phasing out of coal, and that means, in effect, agree to, to killing the jobs of over 3 million people, and actually Anil can talk a lot about that because he was coal secretary, But the fact is, that's infeasible. That's not political. So that's the issue, I think, with the coal.
Thanks, Vikram. Yeah, you said something about economists, and I don't disagree with that. I agree with that. Those models that exist and the policy implications that follow often are not implementable. For example, in a macroeconomic model, if you do a dynamic structural general equilibrium model, you'll come up with services as the fastest growing sector and agriculture as the slowest growing sector. And the policy implication would be that would be tax agriculture and subsidized services. So you can't really rely on something like those economic models. They are able to tell you something. So I completely agree that some of the models will not provide you with solutions. Often in joke, in jest, we say that for the economist, the real world is a special case. Right. So let me go back to Manu, and may I request all of you to be brief so that we can engage with the floor as well. So Manu, last night we were speaking about rooftop solar and the role you said that rooftop solar could play in creating supply for at least households and for your own use. And how do you see rooftop solar scaling up in MP and beyond?
First of all, let me just come back to what he said. And I would say that I would be far more optimistic because of perhaps some personal experience. I have myself seen the way prices of grid-connected solar have come down. I mean, of course, all of us know that solar was around 20 rupees way back, but I myself signed power purchase agreements where we bought solar at 8 rupees in 2012. In 2014, I signed a PPA at 650. In 2015 at 505. And Riva, which I developed, we signed in 2017 at 297. So this is a transition that I have myself been a part of. So if from 2012 to 17, we could come down from 8 to 2.97, and the most important is we brought down solar from above coal to below coal. But this requires a lot of things. It requires a policy. It requires a growing developer confidence in the sector has a huge role to play. Better supply chain, which is also because of greater quantity, confidence and comfort of the lenders with the renewable energy industry. A lot of things have happened. So if solar could come down from above coal to below coal, so would solar plus storage. And when that happens, things would have to fundamentally change and alter. And my belief is that if there is a good project, if something is economically viable, then money would automatically flow to that. That would not be a challenge. I mean, I would again go back to the Riva project that we had set up. This was set up by a company which did not have a permanent office, which did not have any permanent employee, any full-time employee rather. It was a first project by the company. But we had all major companies bidding for the project, including 6 international companies. We had SoftBank from Japan, NG from France, Anil from Italy, Sembcorp from Singapore, 1 Canadian company, 1 company from Mauritius, and all the major Indian players, the 20 bidders. So the point is that if you have a good project, then money would automatically flow in. So if something is economically viable, then I would say that attracting capital would not really be a challenge.
Sure. So do you want to quickly talk about your rooftop solar?
I would just say that, not talk about details, I would just say one short point, that very often we say that there is policy to encourage solar industry. So in rooftop, and that is what is relevant in this conversation, that there is no policy that we have to encourage rooftop. All the policies are to restrict rooftop. Because if solar rooftop would be allowed full space, then it would harm the interests of the DISCOM. So the policies there is no policy to encourage solar rooftop. All the policies are to actually discourage it. So I would again share something that I shared with them last night, that there is an old film, Naya Daur, in which there is a competition in the end between a tanga and a car. So in the film, the tanga wins, but that's a film. in reality, Tanga can never win against the car. So if it's a better technology and solar is better technology, it would find its space. The policy, in a correct word, should encourage it. Sometimes it does not. We hope that it does. But finally, a good technology would prevail.
Sure. Anilji, you said something that I want to come back to, and briefly on. You're saying the coal continues to be subsidized, and the rest of the world is talking about, in India, I'm talking about India, coal continues to be sort of, in a sense, subsidized, either by, supporting, keeping the prices, at levels and no increase in prices. And there is no carbon price for India. If there is some tax, there's some cess, but there's no carbon price. And the rest of the world keeps telling us carbon price is the way to go. If you want to smoothen this energy transition, carbon price is the way to go. And that carbon price comes out to be really high for us to implement in India. So your views around this topic, the transition and the pricing or carbon pricing as an instrument to achieve the transition.
So Rajat, let me clarify that when I said that prices of coal have not been increased, I did not mean to say that it is fully because of the subsidy angle. Let us not forget that coal in India suffers a whole lot of levies and taxes. Right. To give you an example, so when I said that coal prices have not been increased, they have not been increased to the seller. Coal India Limited gets only 1,200 bucks, let us say, for a ton of coal that it might produce in Ranchi. And then, see, the railways, 50%, more than 50% of railways freight income comes from coal. So what they do is they keep overloading freight charges to subsidize their passenger transport. Right. So a 1,200 rupee ton coal in Ranchi would be delivered in Dadri, near Noida, at a charge of 2,200 rupees of freight charges. So 1,200 becomes 34 thanks to the railways, and I used to laugh as coal secretary that actually I subsidize the Bombay Suburban. So, and then you have 400 rupees of GST compensation cess. So to compensate the states, is 400 rupees are levied on it. Then there's a 14% royalty. Then there is something called NMET. Then there is some district mineral fund. So a 1,200 rupee ton coal in Ranchi ultimately lands at 4,500 rupees a ton in this place. So actually, carbon pricing is already there in India. Yeah. In fact, one budget you may have seen, I think 5-6 years back, the economic survey, it had a chart on the carbon taxes levied in India vis-a-vis on liquid fuels vis-a-vis what they're levied in European countries. So the price of a barrel of crude, even if it is $60, $70, and then the excise duty, the import duty, the levies, etc., they ratchet it up to more than $100 a barrel in terms of finished products. So there is carbon tax in India by separate name. So in fact, this new regime of carbon taxes, which the Ministry of Power has just invoked before the COP regime, it will be very interesting to see how they fashion it. Because on one hand, you load all these levies to garner resources from the fossil fuel sector, and then you want to put, the carbon tax on it. So what will happen? I mean, will you continue to subsidize passenger transport? And so basically, you're going to keep making energy more and more expensive. Sure. So this is a very, very tricky topic.
Yes.
But coming from the gas sector, which I now look after,
yes,
I think it is a must for the country to appreciate the environmental aspect in a fuel.
Absolutely.
If they don't do that, then green hydrogen, renewable solar will not be able to. So we will have to rework the entire energy pricing regime, which actually is very, very convoluted for lack of time.
Yes.
I'll not get into.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with you. That we have a carbon price, but we don't call it that. And the rest of the world complains that this is not a carbon price. This is actually a revenue-generating mechanism, and you should have a carbon price. Vikram, your take on that? Why aren't we able to convey this to that we already have a carbon price? And suffer this criticism from the rest of the world?
Before I answer that, Manu, I just want to make sure that didn't misunderstand me. I don't disagree with you that at a micro level there are extraordinary examples of success. The cost competitiveness of solar has indeed improved. My point is that if we are going to make the energy transition, we have to think in terms of scaling up. What you are doing in Reva has to become a national, and for that we need all the other things I was talking about. So don't get me wrong, I do think that there are cases of success and economic competitiveness has been established, technology has been established. What the government needs to do is a lot more, and that's what I'm trying to get. And certainly there's the issue of financing. Financing at the level of a project may be easier to garner, but financing at the level of investing in infrastructure, which is not going to be the responsibility of the private sector, okay, is going to be the issue. And so that's just to make that point very, very clear. And the other point I just want to again point out is that a lot of the competitiveness of energy, new energy, is because we are able to source material from the cheapest source today, which is China. Okay? Solar panels are cheapest, they imported from China. The moment the price of copper and lithium and increases, and it will increase because the demand for copper is going to double between now and 2035, because every country is now looking to make this transition. The demand for cobalt will also double. And as a result, just simple demand supply, the price is going to go up, and so the economics is going to get a little tighter. So that's just the point. I don't know why we can't make it clear. We have, in a way. I think Arvind Subramaniam, when he was the chief economic advisor, made a case that we are already imposing carbon taxes. That was the time when I think, Anil, they introduced that 400 rupees surcharge on coal, if I recollect.
That is correct.
Is that correct?
Correct,
Yeah.
yes.
And today, I read an article just recently where they said that the carbon tax in India is 14 euros per ton. Now, I don't know how they come up with that number, okay?
Yeah.
But there is somewhere along the line, we simply have not communicated the fact. And Anil has just done it. Anil has just given us the simple numbers.
Right.
1,200 to 3,400 to 4,500 rupees.
Right.
That's the landed price.
Yes.
And so you can just need to go through the simple arithmetics and you'll be able to communicate this message. But we are not doing it.
We are not doing it, yeah.
Communication is the other, by the way,
Right.
point I would make with regard to the energy transition. We are not communicating the intricacies of our policy, our polity, and the political economy of the energy transition effectively enough.
Enough, yes. And we therefore suffer this criticism that our price is actually a revenue generating mechanism and not actually a carbon price. It's both. It can be both, yes. And these are the standards, of course, that have been set by international institutions, which we have been so far following, but I don't think we need to follow anymore, and we can create those standards. Anyway, that's a political economy topic, which I'm not going to get into. I'm going to now sort of open up this discussion to the audience. So please be brief and address your question to a specific panelist, if you will. Yes, please, the lady there.
Hi, a question to Manu. Why should we discourage the rooftop solar energy generation? Because in the domestic sector, it's a big help contributing to the grid.
I'm not saying we should. I'm saying we are doing it. And I distinguished in the beginning by saying that I wish policy were always shaped to do the right thing. Very often, sometimes it doesn't. So I would tell you that because you've asked it. So the limit of a rooftop in most states in the country is 500 kilowatt. So the interesting part is there is no limit on putting a diesel genset. You can put as big a diesel genset as you want. There is no law which prevents you from doing it. But when it comes to solar rooftop, we limit to 500 kilowatt. This is largely to guard the interest of the discoms, because the discoms fear that if every good customer is those who pay and those who pay a high rate. So all the good customers would go and shift to solar. So they sort of make sure that the rooftop is really limited. And that's why I was given the example of Naya Daur and the fight between Tonga and the car.
Yeah, the 80-20 rule, you will target the 80% of the subscribers, or 20% of the subscribers, they give you 80% of the revenue, yes. The lady here behind, yes, please.
Hi, my name is Namge Chodan. I'm from Bhutan. I must start by saying that I myself am not much of a techno-optimist because completely understand that the technology is there, but as Vikram said, there are real institutional and political problems. So Vikramji, what would be your top 3 wish list of the sort of interventions that need to come from the policy side to scale the energy transition? Thank you.
I think the first, you have to sort out the pricing. Pricing is a major distortion, and that unless we actually have a pricing system that allocates resources and also changes behavior, we're not going to make it easier for governments and non-governmental organizations to, increase the share of non-fossil fuels in the energy basket. The pricing is a distortion that has to be somehow addressed. It's politically sensitive, but it is something we have to. Second is, I do feel that the institutions of governance regarding energy transition should actually now start from, should be created at a more decentralized level. Now, I mean, I'm just picking up on your own example, Manu. There are really good examples of success, but these are still they're developed, or these successes are developed notwithstanding the fact that we have institutions of energy governance that are very diversified, and they don't, there are 36 authorities today in India, 28 state governments and 8 union territories.
No, state government is far more complicated.
No. 28 state governments and 8 union territories.
One state government is many heads.
Oh, no, but that's fine. 38 authorities that are, I mean, your chief secretary may disagree with you. He may say he has the ultimate authority. But the fact is there are 36 authorities in India, institutional bodies that actually have a say on energy. That's what I'm trying to say. There is no one national energy body. There are in the central government, I think, 7 ministries headed by cabinet ministers responsible for energy. And then there are many other bodies of the state government. We need now an apex body that is responsible for energy transition, that is able to coordinate all of these different sort of initiatives, that is to do with the technology, to do with pricing, to do with financing, to do with the international systems that we have to also work with. That is something that has to happen. I think we really need to perforate the silos that currently exist and prevent coordination at the national and subnational level with regard to energy. So, I mean, those are the 2 things. Decentralized institutions and sort out our pricing.
Yeah.
Yes, last question.
Yeah, my question is to Anil, sir. Sir, there is a contradictory policy with regards to cooking gas, where government is also pushing for piped gas to households, and state governments are subsidizing LPG cylinder. How do you see going forward? Is that viable for investors to invest in city gas distribution?
So, I've been opposing this political agenda of subsidizing LPG cylinders, and I totally agree with you that if we feel that piped natural gas is cleaner, it's more convenient, and one thing we didn't come out in our discussion that today the prices of liquid fuels, which means crude oil-based derivatives, be it diesel, be it petrol, be it LPG, are actually cheaper than even imported gas. So there is every reason that the country should move to piped natural gas rather than LPG. But, and we may not have any problem with PM Ujjwala Yojana, those 10 crore connections which have gone into rural areas, where it will be difficult to get piped natural gas because of very small market sizes, 100, 200 homes, very difficult to spread the distribution network. But let's say Bhopal, Indore, in these places, there is every reason to withdraw LPG and push PNG. So I have a feeling that as we panelists were discussing, that markets are a very strong transition triggers, and so is policy. So, and convenience technology are other things which actually impinge on pricing and convenience. So they will also play a role. So there is right now a very positive, mood in the investors for city gas distribution projects, and but it will need, this handicap of subsidies which are being announced by political parties during election time. That will be a setback. Maybe the governments of the day will think of a PM Ujjwala Yojana for domestic gas, like you have a PMUY for LPG. Let them give the same subsidy. It doesn't add to the exchequer. So I have a feeling that things will sort out in the coming times.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's been a wonderful panel discussion. Thank all the panelists. And I'll just say that, this energy transition for India especially is going to be sort of a long process. But the good news is that there is technology, there is markets, and there is policy. And you need political will to be able to do that. The constraints obviously is politics. Most important constraint is politics. And as Anilji was saying, I think and Vikram also reiterated, which is that the institutional architecture for fossil fuel has been built over, decades, 70 years at least, 80 years. We've had this institutional architecture for fossil fuels. So along highways, you have petrol pumps, along, in cities. So you'll need to change that architecture when you transition away from fossil fuels, and it might take a little bit of time. But, political will, markets are there, policy is there, political will is necessary. Technology, of course, as we've all been saying, is always there. So thank you all. You've been wonderful audience, sitting patiently, and give them a big round of applause.
Thank you so much, dear panelists. It was definitely an insightful session. I'm sure with a combination of better technology and policies, we can definitely change the energy game around the globe. I'd agree with Dr. Rajat that it was an honor to share the room with 3 IAS officers. Now, may I please request Raghav Chandra ji, who is also a former IAS officer himself and also the president of the Society for the Culture and Environment. I'd also request Justice Madan Loku to please come forward and felicitate our panelists with a memento as a token of our love, respect, and gratitude. I'd like to inform the audience that we will be beginning with the break and we'll rejoin by 12:15, 2:15. The memento, ladies and gentlemen, is also the mascot of Bhopal Literature Festival 2024. It's a Gaun painting by the senior most Gaun artist, Ram Singh Urvati ji. It's a beautiful motif which depicts the evolution of life.
Raghav sir, मेरा दिल्ली लेते आइएगा आप.
Absolutely, Anil. I'm so sorry. आपका मैं लेकर आ रहा हूँ. Absolutely, Anil. Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anil ji.
3 cheers for Anil.
This session was sponsored by REC, Coal India, Yes Bank, and iRead. Thank you so much, sir. It was a great session. Do you want it? Do you want someone to? For help?